trainer who got Arjun Erigaisi from 2300 to 2550, close to 2600. Now he's playing on the top board against Magnus Carlsen in the 5th round of the Grenke Open freestyle chess, and he's on 4 out of 4. Look at the position, guys. Freestyle chess, the king and queen have changed their places. On the other side, the bishop, rook and knight are placed in this manner. e4, e5 played. Magnus gets his bishop out, eyeing at the f7 square. And what is Mikhalevski going to do next here? Is he also going to bring his bishop out? Yes, he does. Bishop to c5. It's a very sedate position, one can say. Very similar to our standard chess position, but with very key differences that often if you push this pawn, the queen can jump and give a check, So those things have to be considered. Queen e7, slightly weird move, I must say, but he's preparing short castling here. Knight to c3 by Magnus. He's aiming to jump with the knight to hit the queen on e7. And Victor plays his pawn to c6. The pawn on c6 is taking care of these two squares. Knight comes to g3, and the knight is looking at the f5 square. So Magnus is really racing ahead with his development. d6, the bishop comes out and offers a trade. If you take here, he'll take back with the queen. And Mikhalevski castles here. He's like, if you take bishop c5, I'm more than happy with this structure. Let's see if Magnus goes for it or not. Magnus thinks for a bit and does take on c5. Bishop takes c5. Pawn takes c5. You have this clamp in the center with d4 on the d4 square. But it'll be interesting to see how Magnus continues. Now a4 is a very logical move, because you stop b5, you stop black's queenside expansion. Knight comes to g6. The knight is angling to the f4 square to put pressure on the g2 point. And queen to e3 played. You'll see that the queen is looking here. It's creating a lot of pressure in general. Bishop e6. Should Magnus now short castle is the question. Magnus often feels, by the way, he takes here. Very interesting move. If you take with the queen, Magnus, I think, is happy to chop off a pawn and be a pawn up. So you must take with the f pawn here, unleashing the rook on the f file. Takes fe6. And now pawn to f3. So Magnus is not short castling here. He's trying to keep the king in the center. I don't know if it is very helpful. Knight a6. Mikhalevski might want to sacrifice his pawn at some point with c4. Well, he goes knight f1. And this is what Magnus is so good at. First f3, then knight f1. He'll put the knight on d2, then maybe g3, then h4. Pawn to c4. Victor is like, I'm not going to go down calmly against Magnus. I'm going to go down swinging. He takes the pawn here. Magnus is a pawn up. But his king is still in the center. And this last move, knight f1, is stopping him from castling. Check to the king. This is getting very exciting now. Where does the king go? He first blocks with his knight on d2. And Victor is planning now, maybe he can enter the position with his queen on b4. Yes, he does. Queen to b4, attacking the c4 pawn and the b2 pawn. You see the knight is pinned here. He goes king c1. A good move there by Magnus, defending the pawn and also coming out of the pin, so the c4 pawn is also defended. But knight to c5. And Victor is essentially saying that I have made a positional pawn sacrifice here. I've given up a pawn and I'm happy with it. Magnus goes g3. He's not letting the knight come to the f4 square. That's a good move. And I like this move, rook d7, doubling down the d files, putting pressure on the d2 point. For Magnus to coordinate his pieces, not so easy right now. He goes rook d1. Maybe a good move. Maybe even better was a5. Just stopping black from going a5. Rook d1 played and now doubling down the d file. The pressure is mounting here. And the time shows Magnus with 47 minutes, Victor with 42. Rook comes to a3. And now black needs to come up with an idea. I like this move again, a5, keeping things controlled. Maybe slowly get this black knight from g6 into the game, but Magnus is like, I'm ready to trade a few things. Now look at this. Rook takes d1, knight takes d1, knight takes b3. Oh my god, what? He sacrifices his queen. Insane. Magnus is like, what? Thank you so much, I'm just taking it. Is this a move of a genius or a blunder? It's insane what he's done. Check here. I mean, he could have taken on b3. You can see here, he could have taken here and we could have gone down this line. It's better for white, but very slightly. Instead, took here, takes king b2, and now knight takes b3. But how is this helping his cause? Victor Mikhalevski is completely lost here. Rook takes c3. Or maybe he believes that if he can get his rook here, the other rook here, then he can create a lot of play on the queens on the last rank. Rook h1. And Magnus now plays this very nice move c5. Because with this move, he's going to play c4 and he's going to make a luft for his king on c3. That's just going to end everything. So rook takes h2. He takes another pawn. Well, Mikhalevski in a way has a rook and a knight for a queen. But it's not just rook and knight. You can simply chop this pawn off with white. He takes it. Rook takes b7. Magnus is like, there's not enough compensation here for you, Victor. You have to go rook d2. What else? You have to create your play on the 7th rank. He comes in, rook d2. Rook to c7 played here by white, attacking the c6 pawn. And even though Mikhalevski can win the c2 pawn, Magnus's king is escaping, king to c4. And he goes h6. And now rook takes c6 is possible. Magnus chops off another pawn. Check. King goes up, king to c4. Yes, plays his king to c4. Is there any way in which rook e2 played? Ooh. The queen can just move away. Queen g1. A simple move, even queen c1. Looks fine. But Magnus chops off the rook. What? Queen takes e2, rook takes e2. Now he's a piece down. But guys, this is impeccable calculation by Magnus. He takes on e6. He attacks the knight. Magnus is just believing that his pawn here, along with his king, is going to win this. From being material up, Magnus is now material down. Sometimes I wonder how is it that Magnus can assess position so well. Like this one may not be that difficult for him, But still, I mean, when you could keep the queen, to be able to make this transformation to go here is not so easy. Not at all. King comes to f7. And now it's time to push the pawn forward. c6. Somehow this rook cannot get back into the game. Knight e6 played. And Magnus chops off another pawn. Rook takes a5. King e7. And now a very important move here to cut the king off with rook d5. Otherwise, black is back in the game. Of course he finds it. Of course. There's just no doubt. Give him a tough move and he'll find it. He goes rook e3, attacking the pawn here. And now Magnus gives a check. King e8. And maybe it's time now to start pushing your a pawn. It felt like the c pawn was the runner, but actually it's the a pawn. a5. Rook takes f3. Well, pawn is coming forward, a6 coming in. The only way to now hold this is to go with your rook behind the pawn. But let's say rook a1, f1, rook a1, sorry, here, then rook b7 and check and queen is winning. So he goes knight d8. And Magnus, I think, can just simply go a7 now. But there's also this beautiful way to win. Rook takes knight, king takes, and a7. Magnus wants to create a brilliancy, so he takes here, rook takes d8. And that is all over. A resignation with a smile on the face. Beautiful move. And Mikhalevski was like, I completely blundered. Just queen takes c3. And yeah, it was still a game.